Welcome to Crying Out Cloud, the podcast that will make you laugh, cry, and reconsider all of your cloud security fears. I'm Eden from the CTO team at Wiz, and today we have a super fun, super special episode. To all of Amitai's fans, which I think I'm the head of the fan club for, Amitai is not here today for good reason. And we have the honor to have Alon Schindel, who is the director of AI and threat research at Wiz, joining us. And then we have a super special guest, and we're very lucky to welcome on Haider Dost. Welcome, Haider.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thank you.
Haider serves as the head of global threat detection and threat intelligence at Snowflake, where he oversees a team dedicated to identifying and neutralizing global threats. Before Snowflake, he was a manager of threat detection at Freddie Mac and managed the global cybersecurity operations center at Capital One, which is all very cool. Haider, where are you right now? Where are you calling in from?
Yeah, so I'm actually based just outside of Washington, D.C. on the East Coast. So
Cool.
that is where I was born and raised, and out here still.
Yeah. Are you in like DC proper? I always laugh at everyone who's from like all of the states around DC is like, I'm from DC.
Yeah, so it's funny. I have an engineer on my team who lives in DC proper. So whenever I say, I'm from Washington, D.C., he'll be the first to call me out. But I'm actually not in DC proper. I'm in Northern Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay, so we do this thing when we have guests on the podcast, just as like a fun way to get to know them before we dive into like the serious nitty gritty questions, of just like a few fun short questions, if you'll flow with us, just to get to know you a little bit.
Let's do it.
How did you get into this world of threat detection? At what point were you like, I'm hooked, I love this?
I started out my career in IT security, like getting my degree in IT security, and my first job was a IT like sort of admin internship, and so I kind of was able to get my hands on everything, and eventually that just I think with a lot of people in security, one of my first jobs was in a SOC, and so working as a SOC analyst, one of the things you observe is it doesn't last very long, right? It's usually a stepping stone into something else. And honestly, like it was that, but also there was a little bit of motivation for me in wanting to better the experience on the threat detection side, because a lot of the content that a threat detection engineer and a team or a program produces, your number one customer is your incident response team or your SOC, right? They're on the receiving end. So, having felt the pains of being on that side, I looked at it as like, a win-win. I'm still involved in something that I really enjoy, and I'm able to influence and better, the lives of the individuals who are working these cases.
That's great. I mean, I think we can definitely relate to these feelings and to why we also do what we do over here. I think the next question for us is, who is your favorite threat actor?
My favorite threat actor. That's an interesting question. I don't know if I have one per se, but I think I would. I think one that's really interesting right now, or that they've been, is maybe between the Scattered Spider and Lapsus. Just I would pick them, but I can't say there's a favorite, because these guys are always causing pain. So yeah.
Do you own any super cool Snowflake merch?
I do not. And it's funny whenever I go on site. This is a thing. I have a few shirts, but a lot of the folks that joined early on, they show their swag. So in the office, there's an engineer on my team that was, very early on. They have these like cool like Snowflake vests and different gear that I'm sure you could still get, but there's a difference between buying it and getting it and being there, right? So yeah, but there's some really interesting gear, and I should say like even furniture you could get. Like we have this really cool piece.
No way.
It's basically the Iron Throne, but it's made of a bunch of skis.
I mean, I thought that our merch game here is good, but I think we still have room for improvement.
Yeah.
Are there any, just something curious, also as someone who leads a threat detection team, do you have any specific rituals in your team when you find something novel or like some very interesting new attack?
I wouldn't say there are any rituals per se that we follow. A lot of what we do is I would say it's just documented process that we follow. Nothing really ritualistic per se. Just making sure that all of the relevant teams at Snowflake are engaged and that we're securing Snowflake as a whole. I mean, I think everyone at the end of the day, there's a lot of fun in what we do, but just making sure that adhering to the responsibilities of like what it is that we do. Sometimes it's fun. I mean, even on the threat intelligence side or threat detection side, you like you say, you find something novel or you've solved a novel problem, and there's always a balance of ensuring you obviously secure your organization, and then there's this desire to want to share with the broader org and security community, I should say, as a whole. But yeah, I would say it's finding that balance there.
Okay, let's do it. Let's jump into the fun questions. Let's start off with maybe the elephant in the room, which is the recent campaign that targeted Snowflake customers.
Yeah.
Before we do, I just want to take a moment to commend Snowflake. They did amazing work, and it's definitely an example to other vendors on how to help their customers when they're attacked, and from the transparency around the issue to the extent Snowflake went to help customers and do work by yourself and with other companies to publish guidance and IOCs, which is amazing. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from you if you could share a bit from your perspective, whatever you're able to say about the trajectory of this campaign all the way through like the new changes they published about enforcing MFA.
First, I appreciate that. Supporting our customers and security is really at the heart of like what we do. And I think in the security industry, transparency is heavily respected, and that's just our operating principle. So we wanted that to be front and center in everything that we did. And obviously when you have incidents this large, you want to bring in sort of the best of breed. And so we decided to bring in both CrowdStrike and Mandiant. And so thus, right, you saw we had a joint statement with the both of them and two separate reports that were released, by those organizations. But, with this recent incident, what we saw is really a case of like credential exposure, right? And so this threat actor, who targeted Snowflake, was able to basically use customer credentials that were previously exposed via like several different info-stealer malware, right? And so a key sort of statistic that we were able to put together with Mandiant is that it was like almost 80% of all accounts leveraged by this threat actor in the campaign had a prior credential exposure, right? And I think like across the industry, you're seeing roughly like 10% of all intrusions beginning with stolen credentials. So, when you think about it, these attackers are able to obtain these, credentials because you have, password reuse, or you have, users, inadvertently downloading, some software that's Trojanized and they don't realize it. I would say like, in general, that was the theme with what we observed. And I think what's a little bit interesting as well is that there are contractors, right, that were working with, several Snowflake organizations. They have a lot of access to different Snowflake customers. So, right. So if you have one contractor get popped, a threat actor now has foothold. If they get their credentials, they have, foothold into multiple organizations. So I would say, the theme here is that credential exposures is heart and center of like what happened. And yeah, that's sort of the heart of the campaign we observed.
So, Haider, what do you think are the learnings for organizations from this issue? So, you mentioned that there were, some as contractors that are involved. You have, just the general risk of secret exposure. So, what teams can do in order to reduce the risks and prevent such incidents?
Yeah, I would say, it's the basics really. It's defense in depth, right? Like MFA is a must, and account hardening is a must as well, right? Credential exposures will continue to plague organizations, and I think you just have to harden your environment. And recently at Snowflake, we recently released the Snowflake Trust Center, so it's generally available now to help our customers really bolster their security posture. So there are a few components to this. One being, there will be a prompt encouraging all users to adopt MFA and sort of like walking them through this process. Every time they log in, if they're non-compliant, the prompt will reappear until they're fully set up. You also have the fact that admins can now enforce MFA for all users, right? So to include like SSO and just enabling just security by default for all the accounts across the org. And lastly, I would say that there is sort of the monitoring aspect that will be available via two packages. There's a security essentials package that will sort of run automated checks of your Snowflake account to ensure that you have sort of your MFA compliance, as well as monitoring network policies. And there's a CIS sort of like package, Snowflake Foundations package that will look at sort of like Snowflake security capabilities that are best practices. So you'll be able to take a look at overprivileged accounts and stale accounts and other sort of monitoring things you should monitor. How about that?
Yeah. So it was amazing to see how fast you released some of these features, probably learnings from the incident, like in order to help customers. So again, kudos for that. And I also wanted to ask, like, if you have any interesting insights about the threat actor. Was it? Do you think that it was a targeted effort or a more opportunistic effort by the attacker that they realized that they have these credentials and they wanted to use them?
Yeah, what I can say based on our threat intelligence is that we believe this was opportunistic and targeted at the same time, right? And what I mean by that is you have initial access brokers selling credentials to various organizations, sometimes as low as like $10, right? When you have this available to you, access to organizations, you're going to target that organization potentially. So we're aware of like who we are and what we do and how important it is.
Zooming out a little bit, would love to talk about like detection, whether it's a good detection response to this, but also just more generally, what does it look like to have strong detection in the cloud? Like there are a lot of questions about the right architecture, like are SIEMs still relevant? Are more advanced solutions necessary? I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Your question about SIEMs, right? Are they still relevant? I would say yes, but you kind of, there's a level of, visibility into entitlements, right? But like the buck doesn't stop there, right? If you want to truly, secure and harden your cloud environment as a whole, right? You need more. You need a more comprehensive solution. So I think there's many acronyms thrown out there, but like between a posture management solution and a CNAP, right? Like you need workload protection, right? You sort of need it all to really put together a comprehensive solution for your cloud environment. And I think in addition to that, CDR, right? Like that's a new acronym that I love. Of all the acronyms, because of the benefit that it can provide to organizations, right? So you have, I know Wiz recently acquired Gem, which I'm a huge fan of both products. And Gem in particular, was really their product was one of a kind, right? I mean, they came out with something that the industry needed. Me as a threat detection engineer, or managing this team, I should say, organizations cannot, I think, keep up with building detections for every single cloud TTP at scale, right? Like if you were to try to hire, a team of engineers dedicated to this, you didn't do that versus, organizations, like I said, like Wiz and now Gem acquired, Wiz acquired Gem. It takes a lot of time. And I think the speed and scale at which you're able to do that, pairing that with the posture of your cloud environment, you need a holistic approach. And I think that's really critical for organizations.
Thank you for the kind words about both Wiz and Jam. And yeah, I mean, for us, we saw a great opportunity there because we believe, I agree, we believe that in the cloud there's an amazing opportunity to do both, to take risk detection and the threat detection and runtime detection and kind of correlate all these different signals, because you have, I mean, it's like a whole different world from the on-premises environments, and you can have different signals and actually use all the data and the access that you have about these environments and help with prioritization, help detecting the issues that matter the most. And we're really happy to hear your perspective about it as well.
I mean, what is that famous saying? Like, attackers think in graphs, defenders in lists. We need more graphs for blue teamers to better understand and contextualize and visualize the blast radius to include like timelines. And I think that, having a product that really focuses on cloud native TPPs across all cloud providers, not just AWS, I think is one of a kind, right? And furthermore, incident response in the cloud is very different from on-prem, right? And I think that there's a definite gap in the industry across many organizations where I don't think that teams are really prepared to respond to incidents in the cloud because they don't have the right tooling, right? And that was kind of to my point earlier about like CDR and how beneficial it is. I wish I had CDR years ago, right? I wish that the teams I was a part of, we had a tool that could had all of the robust detections across a bunch of cloud TTPs, the grouping and correlation of those techniques. So, when you ask like, what makes a good detection? I don't think any single detection is a really strong detection or like a silver bullet, right? When you think about detection as a whole, the industry has come a long way. And one of, my team's focus is, and sort of my focus and what I'm trying to champion is moving away from like an individual, detection model where you have, a single detection that generates, an alert based off of whatever, thresholds you've set. Rather, focusing on grouping and correlating multiple signals together to give a complete story, or at least as complete as you can be, for your security analysts or your incident response team to really triage and handle and work with, right? That to me is really at the center of like the detection engineering space, right? So focusing on I think like asset and identity prioritization, right? Understanding the identities and the assets and the criticality they play in the organization, pairing that with a risk and entity based alerting, sort of framework where you're grouping multiple signals. That way, you can really help combat two sort of like issues. One, alert fatigue, right? We're in an industry where alert fatigue continues to plague, security analysts and SOCs and incident responders. There's just so much. And on the flip side, on the detection engineering side, we're in a position where we're trying to cover the most ground, right? We're trying to build as many detections as we can to provide the most coverage that we can to mitigate the risks that are present in our org. So we sort of have, if you look at the two sides of the house, where you have the detection engineering or the content development team, and you have your incident response SOC sort of team, they're kind of competing priorities. One, it wants to build as many detections as we can to provide the most coverage, because that's our job. And then on the other side, there's the like I said, the SOC and IR team that's dealing with those alerts. So how do you actually solve that problem? And to me, at the center of it all is grouping and correlation. It allows the detection engineering team to build and provide coverage, low fidelity signals, high fidelity signals, right? And if those are correlated and grouped together, rather than sending one-off alerts to the SOC and IR team, you're in a really strong position, right? You're able to sort of solve the problem for both teams.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that you cannot ignore, the differences of the cloud. If you do it, you'll probably, lose the battle before it even started. And there are so many advantages to the cloud. I mean, there are like the environment is more dynamic, it's different, but there are also great advantages. And when you talk about doing IR in the cloud, you have the opportunity to actually get, all the snapshots of these resources immediately. And this is something that it's, sometimes when you do IR on-prem, you actually have to physically go and find where this server is. So that's like one difference that the organizations definitely leverage when they think about their IR readiness in the cloud. And there are many more others. So I completely agree with this point of view. Do you have any specific tips? So we talked more about our philosophy and about how we see detection and response in the cloud in general, but is there any specific tip or any specific habit that changed the way your team works, or that made the work of your team more efficient?
There's multiple things I can think of. One, is to have a really strong team. Hire the right people. Build. I work with folks that are much smarter than I am, right? And so I would say that's number one. Number two is work with the right vendors and partners, right? I think that you can internally try to build, what you can, but really what we focus on internally is focusing on mitigating risks that are really relevant to Snowflake. Right, we want to focus on the risks that are specific to our environment. Right, that's really our focus. Whereas I think when you have a lot of partners and vendors, they can focus on a lot of the general TTPs. Right, and so you kind of get this really nice balance of organization specific risks that you're mitigating via detections, and then the general. And if you can sort of merge those two, I think you're in a really strong position. And then the other thing is to really empower your responders, your practitioners with the right tools in the cloud environment. I think if you're not prepared to respond to an incident in the cloud, you're going to have it in for you. Like it's going to be very, very difficult. Yeah.
You had mentioned you wish you had CDR years ago, which is to say, years ago when you were in Capital One by happenstance during their famous breach. It's interesting to hear more about the tools that were accessible to you then versus now, but also to deal with this in a very regulated environment versus in like a Snowflake where you're in a very fast growing company. Can you kind of reflect us kind of those big differences there?
Yeah, I mean, like for one, a lot of these tools were not as available, I should say, or readily available or well known during or just didn't exist during my days at Capital One, and it wasn't that long ago. So it just shows the evolution of the cloud environment. The tools that were available at that time, like the primary tools, were like GuardDuty. In the industry, there was, I know that I believe at the time, like Prisma maybe was available, but there wasn't really much. So a lot of what we had was relying on our internal custom built tools and our internal detections that we put together in addition to what was available in like a GuardDuty. But a lot of, you're talking about a lot of custom internal scripts and manual analysis that had to be done. I actually became familiar and learned about Snowflake while I was at Capital One. I say this from experience. Snowflake makes a really, really strong tool for investigations for data at scale.
So I think our final question for today will be about kind of the future of cloud security. What are still with the progress that we've seen in the past year, what are still the gaps that you see, or what is the next tool that you believe that is missing today and will make your team's life easier?
I'm really interested, as far as the tool goes, I can't say there's something specific. I'm still riding on the excitement and sort of further integration of CDR, to be quite honest. I still think it's a heavily underutilized tool. In fact, when I talk to people about CDR, a lot of folks still don't know what that acronym is. And I think that's a really, critical component for any organization that has any sort of cloud exposure. But what I would say is that the area I'm most interested in seeing, and I think everyone's invested in, is leveraging of generative AI and LLMs in our space, right? So you have all of this, security data. You have all of these insights. How can you leverage, generative AI and LLM to really help, like the Copilot one, right? You have so many vendors releasing Copilots, and I think it's really interesting to see, because the way I look at it is, if someone can develop a strong Copilot for a security analyst or a SOC team that can help them understand and make more sense of the data that they're looking at. Well, there was SOARs in the past, right? And the initial goal of a SOAR was, to really help automate. But now you automate, triage and all of that. But now you can really have, you can help analysts if folks are able to put together a nice Copilot that can really do like root cause analysis, some predictive analytics, right? And give the SOC analysts the information they need to help reduce that mean time to respond, or mean time to detect, and just help with that decision making process. Because I can tell you that as being an analyst and talking to analysts and managing teams, there's analysis paralysis. You don't want to make a wrong decision. Sometimes they're analysts and they know what they're looking at, but like that paralysis creeps in. So I'm really interested in seeing who comes up with a really sort of novel product there.
Whole world ahead of us of good stuff to build.
I'm really nervous about the threat actors that are starting to leverage this stuff. I think that's the scariest thing is we talk about leveraging it, but what about the bad guys leveraging it? So that's, to me, the scariest stuff.
So it keeps us up at night and doing our jobs. So totally. Haider, thank you so much for joining us. It was more than a pleasure to have you on, and super fascinating to hear your thoughts on these topics. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eden and Alon. It was a pleasure and an honor to be able to join you guys. So thank you.
And we're huge fans of the work you're doing at Snowflake. So keep it up, and we're cheering on from the sidelines.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That is all for this episode of Crying Out Cloud, presented by the cloud security company Wiz. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and share a link to the podcast, but not your cloud keys. And as always, if your cloud security strategy is making you cry, don't worry, just cry out loud.